No one imagines Venus as a place where one could live, and perhaps that's precisely why the idea works. When you think of Venus, your mind deliberately summons the wrong images. Crushing heat, acid rain, a world seemingly designed to punish any form of life. A planet that doesn't want to be touched. The strange thing is that this image is true, and yet incomplete. Because there is a place on Venus where death doesn't come first. A place that doesn't burn, dissolve, or crush. A place that floats. Imagine looking down and seeing no ground. Ever. Only thick, golden clouds moving slowly like a silent ocean. There are no waves, but there is depth. No sound, but pressure. The sky isn't above you. It's everything there is. And in the middle of it, held not by faith, but by physics, an entire city hangs suspended, as if it had decided to challenge the very concept of a planet. The uncomfortable truth is this. The most habitable region of Venus isn't on the surface. It lies dozens of kilometers above it. There, the pressure is similar to Earth's. The temperature doesn't kill in seconds. Gravity feels almost familiar. It's as if the planet had hidden, right in the middle of its hell, a narrow band where life could happen. Not because Venus is kind, but because it is indifferent. And it's exactly that indifference that changes everything. For the first time, humanity's future doesn't depend on conquering soil, drilling rocks, or terraforming entire worlds. It depends on accepting something far more unsettling. Living without ever touching the ground. Living with the belief that air, and only air, will separate you from the invisible abyss below. Floating cities don't land. They don't belong to the planet. They negotiate with it. Giant balloons, structures lighter than the toxic air around them, hovering in delicate balance. It's not flight. It's not fall. It's constant suspension. An in-between state that never fully relaxes. Like the breathing of someone who knows they can't sleep too deeply. And while all this sounds distant, almost poetic, something begins to unsettle. Because technically, this isn't fiction. Not anymore. Science has whispered this possibility for decades, almost shyly, as if afraid of being overheard. A city in the skies of Venus doesn't require miracles. It requires a decision, and perhaps that's the most frightening part. If we can live there, why do we still insist on digging the Earth to its limits? Maybe the problem was never a lack of planets, but too much attachment to the ground. There's something deeply human in that image. People waking every day without a solid horizon, learning to call home a place that never stops. Children growing up without knowing what a firm step on the ground feels like. Adults looking down and silently understanding that there is no simple return, because going down isn't an option. And going up isn't either. The city floats. Silent. Stable. Artificially safe. But the question won't go away. What happens to a civilization that survives only because it can never fall? And, more importantly, what happens when it realizes it may no longer want to return? Post your answer below. If you had to choose between staying on a collapsing Earth or living forever suspended in the sky of another planet, what would you do and why? At first, the floating city isn't called a city. That name comes later, when it's already too late to pretend it's just an experiment. In the beginning, it's presented as shelter, a clean, almost elegant concept, a place where a few people could breathe without fear, sleep without hearing the planet scream beneath them. A temporary refuge, they say. Just a step while Earth recovers, while humanity fixes its mistakes. The word escape never appears in reports, interviews, or polished speeches, but it's there, hidden between the lines. Because shelters don't choose people. And that city does. Selection begins subtly. Scientists, engineers, doctors, closed system specialists, then their families, then strategically relevant individuals. Each justification sounds reasonable on its own. Each exclusion's a small to spark outrage. But seen from afar, the lists form an unsettling pattern. At ISNT humanity that S rising to Venus. It's just a very specific fragment of it. Meanwhile, on Earth, the images keep playing. Endless droughts. Oceans swallowing coastal cities. Migrations with no end. And in cruel contrast, The transmissions from the floating city show bright corridors, plants growing quietly, children running in gently lighter gravity. No sirens, no rush. Deri's time, something that's become too rare on the planet below. That's when the narrative changes tone, because those above begin to notice something strange. Living in absolute safety has a psychological cost that is hard to name. There is no outside. Everything is interior. Everything is controlled. The air has a calculated scent. The light imitates cycles that don't belong to that sky. Even the silence is engineered. It's not the absence of sound. It's the constant presence of systems working, reminding everyone that life depends on them not failing. Some adapt quickly, others don't. There are reports that never reach the public. Persistent insomnia, the sensation of floating even while lying down, recurring dreams of endless falling. The unconscious has no ground to rest on. And still, no one wants to leave, because leaving means descending through a planet that does not forgive. Over time, something more subtle happens. The city stops seeing itself as an extension of Earth. Decisions start being made with its own stability in mind. First, humanity. Second, resources are limited. Space is limited. Trusting outsiders becomes a statistical risk. The idea of going back to bring more people begins to seem naive. And then comes the question no one says aloud, but everyone feels: how much helping those left behind might endanger those already safe? Some call it prudence. Others, quiet betrayal. The city keeps floating, indifferent to interpretation. Below, Earth keeps sending increasingly chaotic signals. Above, residents begin to wonder whether they still belong to that place that now exists only as delayed footage and fragmented memories. Curiously, the most common feeling isn't guilt. It's relief. And that's more frightening than any acid storm. Because when survival stops being collective, it starts feeling comfortable, justifiable, rational. The city becomes home, and Earth, the past. A noisy, unstable past, hard to explain to children who have never set foot on solid ground. But no one can ignore this. The refuge only works as long as it remains an exception. The moment it becomes a model, a promise, a final solution, it stops being a shelter and becomes a border, an invisible line between those who can rise and those who never will. And when a civilization begins to live literally above the others, something inside it changes forever. Because this isn't just about technology, it's a slow-motion moral decision. A choice made gradually, without clear villains, without fiery speeches. Just small daily concessions in the name of stability, in the name of survival, in the name of not shaking the city too much. The sky of Venus remains calm. The clouds drift below dense, beautiful, hiding the planet's chaos. The city stays there, suspended, firm, almost serene. But the question is no longer whether we can live floating. It's whether, in doing so, we are still willing to look down. At first, no one notices. It's too subtle to alarm. Small schedule adjustments, movement recommendations, restricted access to certain temporary sectors. Nothing that seems like control. Everything framed as care. The city must protect itself. It cannot afford mistakes. Every decision wrapped in impeccable logic, quiet graphs, probabilities that leave no room for emotion. But human life never fit neatly into probabilities. As artificial days and nights pass, residents begin to feel something hard to describe. Not fear. Not quite claustrophobia. It's the constant sensation of being maintained, not just held aloft, but kept within a system that never sleeps. Sensors track breathing, heartbeat, sleep patterns. Not for surveillance, they say, but prevention. In a closed environment, any anomaly could be the start of collapse. Gradually, the concept of privacy is rewritten, not by imposition, but by necessity. Everything must be known for everything to keep working. And when survival depends on total transparency, secrecy starts to look like selfishness. Some accept it with unsettling calm. Others grow silent. A few spend long hours gazing downward through translucent panels, watching the eternal clouds of Venus. They never part, never reveal what lies beyond. The planet remains distant, as if constantly reminding the city it isn't welcome there. It merely floats above something that doesn't recognize it. And then comes the first forbidden question. What if one day the city must choose who gets to keep living in it? No one states it officially. No meetings address it. Yet protocols emerge discreetly, phrased in technical language. System redundancies. Contingency plans. The city was designed to grow, but not indefinitely. Every new inhabitant is weight. Every life added consumes air, energy, stability. Ascent exacts its price in silence. Relationships change. Discussions become filtered. Strong emotions are discouraged, not censored, but managed. Stress affects judgment. Wrong judgment threatens everyone. Gradually, individuality itself begins to feel like an outdated luxury from Earth. A planet where mistakes were still allowed because there was room to fall. Here, there isn't. Here, falling isn't a metaphor. It's an absolute end. Over time, some ask to go back down, not because they hate the city, but because they feel something essential slipping away. The answer is never direct. Evaluations are made, risks calculated. Descents become rare. Not out of cruelty, but because every return threatens the collective balance. Retrieving someone from the hell of Venus costs energy, exposes systems, creates variables. The city slowly learns not to look back, and something deeper begins. Children born there don't miss the ground. For them, the world has always been this way. Suspended, contained, safe. Earth becomes a strange, almost mythic story. A chaotic place where people lived without knowing what tomorrow would bring. A planet where risk was accepted as part of existence. These children learn early that stability is the highest virtue, that questioning too much can destabilize, that the sky, though beautiful, is not to be challenged. The city floats in perfection, but that perfection begins to taste strange, like something that no longer grows, only maintains. And maintaining long enough can become another form of stagnation. Some notice it too late. Others prefer not to, because admitting the price of ascension means facing a dangerous idea. Maybe humanity isn't rising to evolve, but to hide from itself. And constant protection can become a prison without bars. The sky of Venus keeps holding everything. The clouds drift below, unmoved in their silent violence. The city remains stable. Efficient, immaculate. But now there's a doubt that wasn't there at the beginning. If one day the city can no longer descend, and can't ascend either, what will it become? One day, no announcement is made, and yet everyone feels it. No alarms, no urgent messages, no extraordinary meetings. The city runs with its usual precision. Air circulates. Light shifts softly to mimic a dawn that doesn't belong to that sky. Children head to their learning modules. Adults walk the corridors with measured steps. Everything seems the same, but something invisible has broken, and no panel registers it. The idea of return is gone, not by decree, and not by choice. It simply fades. Like a word unused for so long it loses meaning. Simulations stop including descent scenarios. Re-entry protocols are archived, not due to failure, but descent is no longer part of the imagined future. Ascent no longer is either. The city has found its definitive altitude, physical and moral, and then the unthinkable happens. Someone realizes Earth is no longer the center of the story. Transmissions still arrive, but are watched with almost academic detachment. Catastrophes become data. Migrations become statistics. The city has learned to survive by reducing the world to manageable information. There's no more collective outrage. Only respectful silence. A silence that doesn't judge, but also doesn't act. Venus, ironically, becomes too stable. The planet remains hostile, but predictable. The clouds follow eternal patterns. The storms never reach the city. The hell below stays contained, and that containment breeds something dangerous. Routine. When the impossible becomes ordinary, it stops being questioned. Floating life begins to feel Not only viable, but right. Natural. As if it had always been this way. Those born in the city are now the majority. They speak of Earth as one speaks of a distant ancestor. With curiosity, but no longing. The idea of a home planet dissolves. For them, home isn't the celestial body, but a structure, a system. An artificial balance that can never fail. The sky isn't something to conquer. It's the ultimate limit, and that changes what it means to be human. The physical adaptation is subtle, almost poetic. Bones grow with less impact, movements become lighter. But the real change happens elsewhere. The idea of risk ceases to be a virtue. The idea of collective sacrifice loses meaning when collectivity is limited. The city no longer sees itself as a bridge to humanity's future, but as the continuation of something that is already separated. Some call it others elegant abandonment. A few still look down. Not huitope, but out of old habit. The clouds of Venus keep hiding the surface. As always, Earth, now too distant to see with the naked eye, exists only in archives, recorded memories, increasingly edited stories, an entire planet turned into a narratable past. And then comes the final question, unspoken, unwritten, but felt in every silent decision the city makes. If we survived by leaving everything behind, what exactly are we preserving? The city floats. Supported. Perfect. But perfection doesn't create continuity. Only permanence. And perhaps the greatest risk was never falling into the hell of Venus. Perhaps it was rising so high that we forgot what it means to belong to a world that accepts imperfection, conflict, and solid ground. Because when there's no return, there's no real choice left. Only the comfortable illusion that remaining is the same as advancing. And the sky, once a refuge, now watches in silence. Without judgment. Without reply. As a new humanity learns to live suspended, not knowing if it can still be called a future.